Grisham.
I'm not going to get behind here because then you won't see me. First of all, BamaCarry, thank you so much for inviting me here, for even doing this. What a great group. I've been able to meet a whole lot of fellow Second Amendment and supporters and patriots. Alabama literally is like a second home to me. I used to own a house up in Huntsville. I was stationed up there at Redstone. That's where I did my first sergeant time. If you're from Huntsville, you might remember me from a few years ago where I had a big giant issue with the school district up there over school uniforms. And it became a pretty big story because my kids' school out there, Williams, I think it was Williams Elementary and Middle School, were trying to go to school uniforms, and the parents didn't like it because we weren't involved in that process. And somebody had to organize them, so why not put a first sergeant in charge? So I love Alabama. Alabama is like a sister state for me. We have the same fight that you guys have here. One of the great things is there are things that y'all are fighting for right now that we in Texas fought for just 10 years ago. There are things also that you have here in Alabama that we only got 2 years ago. For example, open carry. 4 years ago, which is like open carry. So it was really interesting to me because I grew up in the military. My father was in the Navy, so I lived all over the place. I am from Texas, but I lived all over the world. And then after I graduated high school, I joined the Army, so I lived all over the world. And so when I was stationed here in Alabama, after my first sergeant time, I knew that my time was pretty much up, and I was about to retire, so I wanted to retire back home at Fort Hood. Here in Alabama was the first time, even though I'd been around guns my whole life, I've been a pro-gun advocate my entire life. My father taught me at a young age how to shoot. I loved in the summers coming home to Texas each summer to work on the farm and then go and shooting. But I never really owned guns. My first gun that I ever bought, first handgun I ever bought was up in Huntsville, and my first license I ever got was up in Huntsville. So Alabama's got a special place in my heart for that. But I go home, I go to Texas, and for the first time, I find out that Texas isn't as Texas as we think we are. Texas isn't as Texas as we think we are, because what I'm doing right here, I couldn't do back then over there in Texas. And one of the things that I did and how I came up to be changed from a gun rights advocate to a gun rights activist. Some of y'all probably heard my story. 6 years ago, I can't believe it's already been 6 years, but next month, 6 years ago next month, I was out helping my son get his Eagle Scout. And so in order to get your Eagle Scout, one of the required badges that you've got to get, any Eagle Scouts out there? All right, we got a few. Congratulations. So as you know, one of the required badges you have to have is hiking, boating, or swimming, or hiking, swimming, or bike riding. I think you can pick one of those three, but it's got to be one of those three. And my son wanted hiking, so I live out in the middle of the country, out in Temple, Texas. I live on my family farm out there. And I told my son, okay, well, we have to do 5 10-mile hikes, and then I think 1 25-mile hike, if I'm not mistaken. So we were on our first 10-mile hike. And I told my son, just keep it out here. We'll just start and end at the house. So plot a course that starts and ends at the house. And halfway through that, I carry my rifle like I always do. When I'm out there on the farm, we've got our rifle in our tractor, we've got our rifles in our trucks. When I'm out walking around, I carry my rifle because we've got hogs, we've got black cats, the mountain lions, plus you've got the criminal element, those kinds of wildlife. And so I was carrying my rifle, my AR-15. Growing up in the military, when I started buying my own firearms, I wanted to buy a gun that I was familiar with, that I could take apart and shoot in the dark. That I didn't have to, if I got blinded, I knew how to operate that thing, no matter what. And so everything I own is an AR-15. That's my hunting rifle, that's my self-defense rifle, that's my at-home rifle, that's my sleep with it to feel safe rifle, whatever it is. That's I like my AR-15s, okay? I got plenty of them. I got one for every day of the week and every day of the year. And so halfway through my hike, I hear a voice behind me. And the voice, all I hear is, wait a minute. It's a pretty windy day, so I wasn't, apparently he had said it twice. I didn't hear the first time. And I heard the second time, and I turned around, and there was a police officer behind me. He doesn't have his lights on or anything like that. He's just getting out. I'm like, oh, okay, somebody's going to come talk to me. Now, keep in mind, at the time, I was a special agent in the United States Army. I worked in counterterrorism, and so I investigated national security crimes. I was a badged and credentialed special agent. I've been working with law enforcement for years. So this didn't seem out of the ordinary for me that a police officer would want to come up and talk to me. I didn't think anything out of it at all. Police officer walks up and he says, what are you doing? I said, we're hiking. And he comes up and he grabs my rifle, which is strapped across my chest here. And I mean, I'm wearing a water pack on my back. I've got a floppy hat. It's obvious we're hiking. And he grabs my rifle and he says, is there some reason why you got this? And in my typical snarky first sergeant fashion, because I can. Well, at that point, the officer tried to disarm me. He started to take off my sling. I'd just gotten back from Afghanistan a few months prior to that. You don't just grab a guy's gun, and you definitely don't try to take it from him without saying something first. And my immediate reaction, it was just a quick reaction, I didn't even think about it, was, whoa, what do you think you're doing? I put my hand on the buttstock and on the barrel of the rifle, and I said, you can't disarm me. And I immediately, within a second, took my hands back off because I realized what I'd just done. And I took my hands off. Well, in that 1 second, the officer had his gun out, stuck it to the back of my head, and threw me onto the police car. I ended up going to jail for resisting arrest. That was changed 3 more times to different charges because, of course, I hadn't broken any law. There was no reason for me to, first of all, there was no arrest to resist. Second of all, there was no probable cause for an arrest. But what I learned through this whole process, they changed the charges. I was eventually convicted after 2 trials because the first trial was a mistrial, and they just could not let it go. They could not let CJ win in this backwoods town of Temple, Texas. He stood up to the system, and by golly, we're going to teach him a lesson. So they took me back to trial, even more. I was convicted of a Class B misdemeanor of interference. Fine, whatever. I have one of the distinctions of being arrested 3 times and never committing a crime once, but still having a conviction on my record. That's what started BamaCarry, Texas, because I realized at that point, I'm looking back at Alabama, and I'm thinking, man, I walked around with my handgun all over the place. Never had an issue. I couldn't walk around with a handgun in Texas, and I could walk around with a rifle. The problem was you had a hard-headed first sergeant button up against a bully. I just happened to get the bully. And those 2 things came into conflict and I ended up losing. But I realized that we had a problem in Texas. And if Texas has got a problem, the country's got a problem. Right? And so there was an event that a group had put together to bring. So I was just one guy walking down the road with a rifle in Temple, Texas. 3 months later, we had over 400 patriots walking through Temple, Texas with rifles. And what that's grown into is over 50,000 BamaCarry, Texas members carrying rifles. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to show the absurdity. So you've probably seen on the news back in 2013, 2014, all these crazed Texans walking around in Walmart and Target and Home Depot, and we're going shopping. We're doing our grocery shopping with an AR-15 and an AK-47 on our back. And who are these crazy, psychotic gun owners that are daring to exercise their rights in this way? They're making us all look bad. They're going to hurt the Second Amendment. We heard it all. I heard it all. And the reason we did that is to make a point to our legislature. I can walk around with any rifle that I own. It could even be fully automatic if I paid Uncle Sam the tax extortion fee. It could have even been a fully automatic. It could have been a suppressed or it didn't matter. But if I had so much as just a little 380 LCP pistol that you could see poking out of my pocket, I was a criminal. Does that make any sense? No, not at all. That's the point that we wanted to make, and we made it. Our first legislative session, Texas went from being one of only 6 states that banned open carry to one of 45 states that allowed it. And now there's only 5 that don't. So we've been working closely with Florida and with South Carolina, and who am I missing there? South Carolina, Florida, there's New York, California, Illinois, that's it. Who cares about those other 3 states? So I'm just working with Florida and South Carolina. But we were able to do that because people were able to take a stand. And it's kind of unfortunate that it took me a year, and I want to dovetail this into, when that happened to me, it nearly destroyed me. Because when you're facing, especially a guy who's never been in trouble in his life, never had a criminal record, I made first sergeant in 10 years. That's, I mean, I love the Army. I am a straight shooter, I'm a hard worker. Everything I've done, I've worked really hard to do, and all of a sudden, boom, this happens, and now I'm a dirtbag. And had it not been for Self-Defense Fund coming to my aid and helping me through that time and through those trials, and I'll tell you, they fought their ass off. If you're not a member of Self-Defense Fund, because you wonder if you're ever going to need it. I never thought I was going to need this. I've been walking around with my rifle out in the country forever. Never had an issue. I've had cops pass me. Never had an issue. It just took that one time when I least expected it, that it just so happened I got thrown into the system. So don't think that just because you're a law-abiding citizen that you're never going to get thrown in jail. Don't think that because you never break the law that you're not going to have to worry about the law. Because you never know that if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with that wrong person, that one guy that should not be wearing a badge, you're going to get tossed into this nightmare. And it was, what, $175,000 this case, Larry, something like that? This was I now own the record for the most expensive Class B misdemeanor case in Bell County, Texas. So, because it was such a nut-roll, it became a national issue. And so thankfully they came to my rescue, and what I started to learn is we got Open Carry Texas founded. In just a year, the first 6 months of Open Carry Texas, we had 24 more arrests. Because this is something that in Texas, people just weren't doing. People weren't going out there exercising their rights. We as gun owners had become so complacent. We just assumed, okay, well, I can carry concealed, and we don't have to so-called shove it in everyone else's faces and all that. And when you step out of that comfort zone, you start recognizing whether or not you truly are a free people. Are you truly a free people if you never have anything to worry about because you always do what you're told? Or are you a free people if you never have to worry about because you do your thing, which is free, be free, without bothering anyone else, and then you still have nothing to worry about? The true mark of freedom is when you step outside of that box and you start doing things that aren't in the norm, like carrying a rifle all over the place and into places where people might find it offensive, and seeing that reaction. So the question is, why should anybody be calling the cops because there's a guy walking around with a rifle? Why should somebody be calling the cops because someone just sat down next to you at Burger King with a handgun on his hip? And yet that's what we see with the gun control crowd. They have successfully taken gun rights and made it something that we're supposed to be ashamed of. And what we need to do as gun owners, and this is what I want to emphasize today, is that we have to become activists. Because the left has no problem going to any extreme necessary to take away your rights. They don't mind taking a little cheese slicer onto that 1 pound brick of cheese and just slivering off a little slit here, and then coming back and taking another little sliver off. If you look at your rights like a giant block of cheese, only I can think of it this way. And then you take a little cheese slicer and you slice off a little, slice or whatever. That's what the gun control crowd is doing to us. Enough. Enough is enough. Take their hashtag back from them. Enough is enough. There is no more middle ground. We're at the middle ground. We're past the middle ground. We started way over here at freedom, right? And then we got the National Firearms Act, and then we got this act, and then we got this act, and then you've got all these, the Safe School Zones Act and all that. Now we're right here, and they're way over there. This is where the gun control crowd is. And they want us to meet them in the middle, which is right here. That's where we should be, is way over there. So we're already away from over there. It's very difficult. This is what I've learned, at least in Texas. But I will tell you, there's a happy ending, so please stick with me. Texas doesn't suck. There's a happy ending. What I have learned is that when you take a stand for something, it's very difficult. It is very hard to go against the status quo. I mean, Caitlin just talked about that. People don't carry rifles at Kent State, by golly. That's wrong. And what does she do? She goes and does something that is against the status quo, and what happens to her? She gets castigated. And it's the same thing with gun owners. Why are we so afraid? Why are we so afraid to be proud of the fact that we believe in defending life? I've got a pro-life bracelet on here. Many will find that I'm actually more of an extremist on pro-life issues than I am gun rights issues. But my belief in gun rights comes from my belief that life is precious and should be protected at every level. I can't use a gun to protect a baby in the womb, but I can use a gun to protect that baby once it comes out. And I can use that gun to protect myself after this baby has grown into an adult. And I can use that gun to protect the babies that I've had and help them growing up. So we have got to stop, as a combined community, being afraid to take a stand for something because we're afraid of what it's going to look like. I mentioned the fact that I came under heavy attack. Caitlin talked about being under attack too. I don't want to bash anyone in particular, so I'm not going to say the NRA's name. But I was told point blank I needed to stop. CJ, you need to stop. You need to tell these guys to stop carrying their rifles all over the place. You need to, and then they come out later and say that what we're doing is downright weird and scary. Okay, to who? Because there's 50,000 people, well at the time there was about 20,000, that don't find it scary. And after about 6 months of doing this, nobody found it scary anymore. And I still do bike rides all around the state. One of the things that I am kind of known for now is I'll take my bike on the back of my car, travel to some city somewhere in Texas, strap on my AR-15 on my back, and go for a nice bike ride, exercising my body and exercising my rights at the same time, just to talk to people about gun rights. And a lot of times people will call the police and the police will show up, and thankfully they get it. They know that what I'm doing is perfectly legal. But if we're gonna, so as a soldier, one of the things I've learned through dealing with my own post-traumatic stress disorder when I got back from Iraq, I went through a lot of training through some very intensive PTSD programs, and one of them is immersion training and exposure training. And when a combat veteran comes back, it's very difficult, for example, to, the 4th of July, as much as we love our freedom, it's a very difficult time for people who've been in combat and have to worry about the sounds of firecrackers really close, especially if you don't know what's coming. But the only way that I learned, this is what I learned, is the only way I'm going to get over that is to expose myself to firecrackers. And so on the 4th of July, instead of trying to find some place to hide or just drugging myself into a coma until it was over, I went out and started watching fireworks. Was it hard? Did it race my heart? Absolutely, it does. It still does to this day. But I've learned how to manage that. The only way I've been able to overcome that, and I still get startled by it, but I'm not triggered by it anymore because I've exposed myself to it. This is what the left needs. The left just needs to be exposed to what they find traumatic because all it is ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of education. And a lack of education which leads to ignorance, ignorance leads to fear. And then fear, of course, leads to bad legislation. And so if we don't go out there and exercise our rights, if we don't go out there and show them what a good guy with a gun looks like, they're going to continue to be afraid. And if they're going to continue to be afraid, they're going to continue to push for laws that are going to undermine your Second Amendment rights. And if they continue to do that because they haven't been exposed to it, I like to, when the police, I just had a great experience in Buda, Texas. I was out riding Tuesday, this last Tuesday. A police officer pulls up next to me, he's like, hey, can I talk to you? And I've got my rifle on my back. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And he's like, hey, I don't have my lights on, you're not being detained. As you know, we got a call. It was a great stop. And I told him, when I explained what I was doing, is I want to show people what a good guy with a gun looks like. Because all that the media, I apologize, all that the media shows is the negativity. They're so quick to show that, look at this. They're so quick to show the negative about the school shootings and all that. But in Texas, we just had Stephen Williford down in Sulphur Springs. Remember that church shooting that just happened recently? Well, Stephen Williford stopped that shooter from doing more damage. He killed that guy. You know how he did it? With an AR-15. But that kind of story goes away. In Houston, just a few weeks ago, 5 guys busted into a house, 5 thugs, busted into a house, 2 were killed, 3 were injured with what? An AK-47. That guy defended his house with an AK-47. If you look at the crime scene photos, the crime scene flags where all the bullets landed, it was like a flower garden on the front lawn. So that's the kind of flower garden, that's the freedom garden right there, that's what I call it. So, but if you read the stories, I defy you, go and read homeowner invasion, Houston, 2 shot, 3 injured. You will not read that an AK-47 is what was used to stop those 5 guys. Now, can you imagine if there was a 5-round limit or an 8-round limit in Texas? How are you supposed to stop 5 guys? You got 3 chances to miss, and you better hit those other 5 if it's an 8-round limit. Or you've got 5 misses if it's a 10-round limit. So these kinds of things have got to go away, but you don't, or have got to be fought, excuse me. But you don't hear those kinds of things. We have got to get out there and show people what a good guy with a gun looks like. And the only way we're going to do that is by being active in our communities. And I even say open carry. I don't open carry, well, I open carry most of the time because I do it for educational purposes. But if you're not somebody that open carries all the time, just try to find some times here and there. And because here's what's interesting. When you open carry, people will come up to you and talk to you. You know the scary thing about open carry, how it's going to scare everybody and people are going to start wetting their pants and we're going to have to start having, the adult diaper industry is going to go through the roof. That's what we were told with open carry in Texas. It's just going to be the end of the world. But people will come up and it's amazing. I've never had a negative encounter carrying a handgun. Now, when I carry my rifle, it's amazing how mouthy some people can get. But what's even more amazing is if gun owners were as dangerous as the left said we were, there would be fewer people mouthing to me when I've got my rifle on my back. But by getting out there, we are going to inoculate these people against this fear of an inanimate object, and we show them what a good guy with a gun looks like. So that's the main message I wanted to bring. But it's hard. It's really hard. Last year, almost a year ago, so I don't know what it is about me in March, because it was 6 years ago in March that I got arrested and that started Open Carry Texas, and it was last year in March that I went to Olmos Park, which is a San Antonio suburb. And what had happened was this was sort of a continuing escalation in the city. And it started with what they call First Amendment auditors. These are people that go around with their cameras and they film government. They might film a police stop or something like that. Well, they were filming on the side of the road, filming something, and almost police came and gave them a hard time. So that group went back, but this time they went back and they were open carrying. Well, this time the police showed up and they pointed guns at them and they ordered them on the ground because they had a gun and they wanted to check their license. And so then they went back for a third time to protest the fact that they had been treated that way, and they had a big sign. And the police showed up again in Olmos Park, and they pointed guns at him. They ordered him on the ground, put your sign down. And he's like, what? I just got it. All he had was a sign up. Ordered him to put a sign down. So that's when I got involved, because now it's a Second Amendment issue. These guys are pointing guns at law-abiding citizens who are obeying the law, and they had contacted us at Open Carry Texas. I found out about it. So I contacted the city. And I told the city, which is what I always do whenever there's an issue, the first thing I do is I contact the chief, and I contact the city manager to try and fix the issue. And I told them that, look, this is the law. You guys can't go around pointing guns at people just because they're open carrying a handgun. These guys weren't even carrying rifles. They just had a handgun in a holster on their hip. So After 10 days, I didn't get a response. So after 10 days, I contacted the chief myself and said, okay, well, apparently you're not listening to me, so maybe you'll listen to hundreds of us when we come into your town. And I told him we were and I started planning for a big rally in Olmos Park to protest how they were treating gun owners. So I called the chief on a Monday, and I had a phone call with the chief. This is, I put this on my YouTube channel, and I explained, he made sure that I knew that he knew, look, open carry is legal. And I said, well, if I come into your town and I'm open carry, am I gonna have to worry about being shot? Oh, that's just a nonsense. I'm not even gonna answer that question, that's a nonsense question. Well, am I gonna worry about getting ordered on the ground, face down, at gunpoint? That's just an absurd question, I'm not gonna even answer that question. Open carry is legal. Well, are you gonna tase me? That's just an absurd question. I literally asked all the questions that the next day, I went to Olmos Park, because the way that Open Carry Texas does rallies, they're actually very planned, very well planned. Because I want to make sure that everything that is done, so I didn't know that maybe these First Amendment activists were doing something that was causing the police to act this way. So I took some friends that I trust, some veterans that I could trust that wouldn't lose their minds if guns were pointed at them, people that I trust not to be crazy, people that I trust could handle the pressure of, if Olmos Park did this again, would they be able to respond in a way that Open Carry Texas would be okay with, and it would make us look okay. And we went to Olmos Park on a Tuesday, the day after I spoke with the chief. And within 4 minutes of being out there, we went out and stood on the corner. 2 police cars roll up on each end, pull their guns out and start ordering my buddy on the ground at gunpoint. And he's trying to explain to him, well, I haven't done anything, what's going on? I'm not breaking any laws here. They wouldn't even talk to the guy. All they did was order him on the ground. Well, I heard about it. I was only about a block away because I walked over to the police station, and I started walking back. This is, like I said, less than a block. And that's when I got involved. And I explained to them, guys, you better put your guns away. I just spoke to your chief yesterday about this. You guys are wrong. This is all on YouTube as well. And they refused to do that. Well, then other cops started showing up from Olmos Park, and I asked, are you the chief? Are you the chief? No, none of these guys are the chief. Finally, the chief shows up, and I'm thinking, finally, this is going to get fixed. The chief shows up, and what does he do? He escalates. He starts screaming and yelling, ordering people on the ground as well. Next thing I know, the chief, and he's telling me to move and back off. I'm like, no, I'm not. I have a right to be here. I have a right to stand where I'm standing. I have a right to have this handgun in a holster. He has a right to have that rifle on his back. There is no law being broken here. There's no reason for us to move, for us to leave, for us to get on the ground. And there's no reason for you to point guns at us. And so he ordered one of his officers to start grabbing me and try to arrest me. And I put my hands up and I started backing up. And he's trying to grab me, and I'm like, look, leave me alone, I'm not breaking any laws. The chief himself tases me in the back. Tases me in the back as I'm backing up. It was like a board. My whole body seized up, smacked, my head bounces off of the concrete. I split my head open on the back. I'm bleeding all over the place. And I explained to the chief, what the hell are you doing? I just spoke to you yesterday. So, there's danger in being an activist, but guess what happened that following week? There are some cities in Texas that they're not allowed to do this, but they have ordinances where you can't carry a loaded rifle on city in public. You're not allowed to do that, and generally it's the big cities that have done this, the liberal cities. Well, they're illegal because in Texas you can't. A municipality is not allowed to create a law that's stricter than state law at all. And there are only certain things that the state allows the city to regulate, and that wasn't one of them. Well, all of a sudden, Olmos Park decides, oh crap, because a week and a half later, 650 armed Texans were walking through Olmos Park with rifles, with pistols. And what's even better is Olmos Park decided they were probably going to take that day off. We didn't see a single Olmos Park police officer anywhere in the city throughout this march. So it is, but let me ask you, I still go out there and I still do what I do. I am not an aggressive person. I do not like violence. I got my fill of that. I didn't like it in combat. I definitely don't like it back home. I fought over there so I wouldn't have to fight here.
Amen.
And so I do try to solve these problems at the lowest level, but I am not going to back down. I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of logo or badge or title you have on your shirt or on your uniform or on your desk. My rights are unquestioned. And I'm going to take a stand, and I'm not going to move. And is it going to hurt me? Yes. It has cost me friends. It has cost me family. It has cost me money. But what it hasn't cost me is freedom. And that means more to me than anything else. Because what good is all of those things if you're not free to enjoy them? If I can have, it's great that I've got a family, but if I'm not allowed to leave my house, what good is that? It's great that I've got friends, but if I can't go hang out with them on a Saturday night, what good is that without freedom? And so we have to decide as gun owners what is important to us. Do we continue to allow little things to happen here and there, or do we take a stand when it counts? And it doesn't have to be, one of the things I wrote down here, because I get accused of kind of being aggressive. And I make a point not to scream and yell at a cop that is trying to violate my rights. I've learned that lesson over the last 6 years. But I'm assertive. And there is nothing disrespectful. We can honor law enforcement, and we can respect law enforcement, and we can and support law enforcement in what they do. But we can also stand up to them when they're doing the wrong thing. There's nothing disrespectful about that. As a matter of fact, there's nothing more respectful than holding a government official accountable to the Constitution. You guys have a battle right now. I was talking to Paul before I came over here asking what some of the laws I should be concerned about. And I think it's SB 4 is a big bill for y'all. I spoke to your senators and offered them any services I can provide, any advice, because we went through the Motorist Protection Act 10 years ago. In 2009, we were able to carry in a vehicle without a license. And so in a sense we have, and this is what we've been arguing, is we have constitutional carry in Texas, but you have to be on your private property or carrying a rifle or in your vehicle. And what we heard in 2008, or 2009 when these laws were being talked about, is law enforcement came and said, and I'm talking about the unions, not the street cops, but of course all the lobbyists and stuff. So the law enforcement unions and lobbyists came and they said, there's going to be blood in the streets. Our cops aren't going to know who the good guy and the bad guy is. If we pass this, our cops are going to be unsafe in the streets. We're going to have so many dead police officers because we don't know who's carrying in the vehicles because you don't have to have a license. It's going to be mayhem. Cats are going to start loving dogs. It's going to be psycho. And what has happened in the last 10 years, because this is the 10th year, is nothing. I told the legislature, you know how many complaints we had? 0. And that's something that we can help you guys with. That's what I wanted to bring from Texas to here. As you fight these things, you can say, when you go and talk to your legislators, say, look, Texas already passed this 10 years ago. We heard the same arguments you guys here in Alabama are hearing every day. And then what I take back to Texas from Alabama is, I just went to Alabama and I was open carrying everywhere I went, and I didn't need a permission slip from the government to do it. Why do I need a permission slip here in Texas? Texas is one of only 14 states that requires a license to carry at all. That's it. We're one of 14, because 35 or 36 states don't require a license to open carry, and of those now, we've got 15 or 16 states that don't require a license to open or concealed carry. All right, you said I've got 2 minutes, probably down to 1. That was my message about activism. Get out there. Don't be afraid. Stand up for liberty. Stand up for yourself. It's not disrespectful to say no. When someone tells you to do something that you're allowed to do, that you have a right to do and not to do it, tell them no. Take a stand for it. I promise you that no matter how many people tell you you're hurting the cause, that you're setting the Second Amendment back, that's the exact opposite. What we're doing is we're making it great again, the Second Amendment, by going out there and exercising our rights. So thank you for having me. I'll be over here as well, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and for listening. You guys take care, God bless, and be free.